Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Beware the Board, a horror podcast where we watch a randomly selected horror movie every single week. I'm Bob.
I'm Ben.
Season 8, Ben.
Yeah, welcome to season 8.
We fucking did it. We got through 7 through 0. Well, 1.
I don't know what the fuck you're talking about right now, but yes, we did 7 seasons.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, we made it. I've made it this far. Remember when we started the podcast and I was like, man, I might quit after this spider film. And now I've seen so many horrific things and I'm desensitized. It's great.
We're on season 8 and you might quit now.
I hope not.
I mean, me too. But for anyone who doesn't know, Bob has been dreading one of the categories that is in this season for the entire length of the show.
Yeah.
And
over a year we've been doing the show, I've been telling you I don't want to do this one.
For over a year, he's been like, if we get this category, I might quit. So we're going to see how it goes this season. Now, as you all know, we got a new board. That means new categories. So for anyone who's not aware, our categories this season are mine, which is early found footage films.
Yeah, which is cool.
Yeah, so it's primarily going to be stuff pre-Blair Witch.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's kind of the kickoff for, like, found footage as a mainstream kind of concept. Our random is Cannibals.
Fuck you,
which
bro.
I'm so excited for.
I'm so unexcited for that category.
I'm not even excited to watch the films. It's more so it's been on the board since, like, the first episode of the podcast.
Yeah.
And
it was one of the first, like, categories you pitched for the show.
Yeah.
And I literally told you no.
And I've been waiting. So that's exciting, especially because I've had the movies picked out that long, too.
Mm-hmm.
And then Bob's category, which is Romero films.
Yeah. Because we've seen his big 3.
Yeah, it should be interesting because he has a bunch of films, but outside of, like, the Living Dead franchise, a lot of them are less well known.
I know, and that's exciting for me. And we learned quite a bit about them at the convention because, you know, we went to Day of the Dead panel, and there were a bunch of people that worked with Romero on multiple films. Like
I mean,
Tom Savini and whatnot.
His ex-wife was there.
Yeah, so it was super cool to hear them talk about the other stuff outside of the Living Dead franchise. So I'm excited to watch these films.
Yeah, so that's super exciting. With that being said, though, you know, we usually talk about some other stuff before we get to that. So, Bob, do you have anything you want to talk about today?
I have a couple things. Everyone knows that we are both huge fans of the Toxic Avenger. You know, new one coming out soon. They just remastered the original in 4K on Troma streaming service. So if you're interested in that movie, go watch it on their service. It's now in 4K. I haven't watched it in 4K yet, but I want to soon.
Yeah, we've mentioned that before. Are they releasing it in 4K on Blu-ray?
I think so.
As well? I'd assume so, right?
Yeah, I think they're doing that, which is super cool. I love that film. It's one of my favorite movies.
Just know,
ever.
Though, that if you're getting a 4K Blu-ray DVD, you need a 4K Blu-ray player.
Yeah.
And TV.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't work if you don't have all the equipment.
Yeah.
It just plays in lesser definition.
So, in Toxic Avenger news, the Toxic Avenger is getting a 5-issue comic book run with the first issue to be released on October 9th, 2024. It is to be drawn by 2-time Pulitzer Prize finalist and founder of The Nib, Matt Bors, who, The Nib, if you don't know, is like a political satire-like comic thing. They do, like, political satire comics. They do there's a bunch of really famous ones made by them.
It is also the tip of a fountain pen.
Okay, well, that makes the name make a lot of sense.
Because Bob didn't know that.
A fountain pen. I was doing research. And Fred Harper, the artist on Snelson, which if you don't know of Snelson is it's a very famous comic that this dude, Fred Harper, has done the art for. The series will combine the elements of the original film and the Toxic Crusaders cartoon, which I think is sick as fuck. Super cool that they're combining them both. According to Tom Pear, the editor-in-chief of Horror Comics, the people making the comic book, the Toxic Avenger delivers what Troma fans want. The series has violent action, gross mutations, bursting pustules, eye-popping visuals, and trenchant humor. I'm excited.
Of course you're excited, Bob.
It's cool, man. Like, you know, I'm a fan of comic books. This is one of the ones where I'm like, damn, I might actually collect every issue of this because I'm really interested.
Well, it's also that you're just a Troma stan, so
I am. Troma, favorite studio.
Troma raised Bob instead of his parents.
I wouldn't. I mean, look, you're not wrong. I do love their films. I very much love everything they put out, especially like Toxie related. So I think that's super dope. Next thing, 2 fresh takes on older films are allegedly in the work at Lionsgate. The first being a remake of the 2000 film American Psycho, which we haven't watched on the podcast. I don't know if you would consider that a horror film.
No, American Psycho can qualify as a horror film in the same way that, Psycho can qualify as a horror film. The fact that it's being remade, though, is kind of...
I think it's interesting.
Yeah,
I've never seen it.
I'm going to describe it as interesting because that film is very, very good and is very reliant on the chops of its actors.
Mm-hmm.
And so to remake it feels...
Unless you just bring Christian Bale back.
He's so much older now.
He's so much older now, but I mean, come on.
But it feels kind of not only wrong, but I'm not sure you could make something as good. It's also only been, what, like 20 years?
It came out in 2000, yeah. It's been 24 years now.
Not that long.
It's long for
it's a long time, but not for like remake territory.
But also, a lot of people love American Psycho.
Yeah, I know, but it just screams cash grab.
Maybe. I'm interested in it because, first of all, I've never seen the original, and I have friends that really like that movie, and they always talk about it. So I've also seen tons of American Psycho memes. Patrick Bateman is such a memeable character.
Like, yeah, because he's psychotic.
Yeah. I mean, you're not wrong. It's called American Psycho. The other film, which is, we watched a Stephen King film on the podcast in like season 2? It was a while ago. We watched we
watched Dreamcatcher.
Which is not a great movie.
Such a bad movie.
Such a good book.
Surprisingly good book for a man who has admitted was on so many painkillers at the time. We all know Stephen King has had drug addiction problems.
Yeah, he's been very open about that.
This time it was explicitly after a car crash, so they were, in this case,
pain medication.
Pain medications for actual pain.
Mm-hmm. But there is a new adaptation of Stephen King's The Dead Zone in the work at Lionsgate.
Oh, now that one's actually exciting.
I haven't read The Dead Zone.
No, I know you haven't.
I've heard it's very, very good.
I have. In fact, I think it's one of, if not the first Stephen King books I actually ever read.
Really?
Yeah, because my dad really likes it, and we just owned a copy of it. Do you know the premise?
Dude gets in a car crash, wakes up with psychic powers?
Yeah, I think I've described it to you. Yeah, he's in a car crash, and very explicitly, it's a really, really, really bad car crash. Like, he's the only survivor.
Damn.
And I believe what explicitly happens is some bone fragments from his own skull go into his brain, and he's in a coma for years. And when he wakes up, first of all, his body's fucked. 'Cause if you don't know, if you're in a coma for a while, it's not like you wake up and you're fine.
Mm-hmm.
Your body atrophies. It's really bad. So he has to get like a bunch of surgery to fix his body. But they also figure out that, he has brain damage. It's fairly minor, but the quote-unquote dead zones in his brain where, like, he's missing stuff give him psychic powers, and it's very specifically the psychic powers where you touch things and you can see kind of like what's happened to that object.
Kind of like clairvoyance, or
Yeah, there's a specific word for that type of psychic power.
He gets like premonitions about things.
Yeah, but they're the past.
Oh,
like you see what happened to that object.
Mm-hmm. That's cool.
Especially very like emotional things that happened with it. So it's very interesting.
Well, didn't they already do a movie about the Dead Zone? Doesn't it have Christopher Walken in it?
Yes, Christopher Walken's the main character. And like it's a fine movie. Like it's not horrible or anything. And it's cool to see it got, made as a movie with a fairly professional budget for a Stephen King film from the 90s. But to be honest, my main issue with that film is it has Christopher Walken as the main character. And I love Christopher Walken.
No, Christopher Walken's great.
I think he's very funny, but I have trouble taking him seriously.
No, yeah.
And that is a very serious role with a very troubled character.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of be cool to see it remade with with an actor who I'm like, I can take this person serious from like, oh, this person is suffering kind of angle.
No, yeah, this one's cool too because I also know a lot of people. I'm just excited that they're remaking stuff that I know people enjoy. Not only because, like, it'll make them money, but it'll be cool to see different takes on older stuff, considering how popular it is and how much people like it. Maybe it'll be better than, the original two. I doubt it because, most of the time when stuff gets remade, it's not as good as the original, but it's exciting and cool. That's my last piece of news, though.
Okay, that's all you got?
Yeah, that's all I got. Do you have something before we start the show?
Yes, I do. and it might make you kind of mad.
Hold on, am I about to get angry on the podcast?
Well, not like angry, but like I'm gonna hit one of your triggers here.
What?
Okay, so not really horror movie related, but it's tertiary. It's the stuff we enjoy on this podcast. There's a new film coming out this year. It's called Boy Kills World.
Oh my god.
And it's about...
I got a goddamn message about this earlier.
It's about Bill Skarsgård, who's mute in this film.
Yeah.
Going on like a revenge rampage against this one family who organizes like public killings on television that are sponsored by cereal companies with cereal mascots. And the reason I bring it up is, A, the main character is Bill Skarsgård, who, if anyone doesn't know, is It.
Yeah.
In the most recent...
Very good actor.
It films. But also, Bill Skarsgård's character is mute. And so I think a lot of his dialogue is from his inner voice.
Yep.
Which is like, there's a narrator in the film. And it's H. John Benjamin, who is, first of all, pretty cool. He is Benjamin in the name. But also, it's Bob Belcher from Bob's Burgers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Bob just loves that show. It's
Sure.
like his favorite animated TV show on television.
So earlier today, first of all, I had to have a disdain for that show because A, I came first. I was born before that character was created. Stop using my name like that. Get out of here. Never watched it. Never will. Out of spite. Putting that out there. Ben got me a very funny gift. It's sitting over there. I'm looking at it. It's a Bob's Burgers beanie. I've never worn it except for on the podcast for a joke. I never will. But thank you for that. Earlier today, my friend Mason sent a screenshot of a TikTok talking about this movie. It says, Bill Skarsgård in a crazy action movie with Bob Belcher in his inner voice. He said, and then he added me in the server and said, Bob, what the fuck? You didn't tell us? And I said, NDA. I was like, NDA? Couldn't talk about it.
It looks pretty funny. I thought I'd bring it up.
And you know what? Maybe I'll watch the film. But I still have hate in my heart for that character. Nothing against the person, though.
It's okay.
He's a voice actor.
One day we'll watch Bob's Burgers.
No, we won't.
Yeah, we will. It'll be like the most horrifying thing Bob's ever done.
Sure.
All right. On that note, though, I think we can get into the podcast.
Yeah, the podcast part of the podcast?
Podcast part of the podcast. All right. So we already went over the stuff, but we have, early found footage films. So a little bit experimental before Blair Witch Project. Cannibals as a random. And then Romero films. Bob, what are you choosing today? Because, I know you're dreading Cannibals.
Yeah.
And we've joked around about the fact that, you're just going to save it for the last 3 spots.
No, I can't do that to myself. I told Ben.
But you told me you can't do it.
Ben was like, you know what you could do? You could just save Cannibals for the last 3 spots of the season. And then you just get a bunch of time off and don't worry about them until the end.
You put it off like you've already done for 8 seasons.
I could not sit through 3 Cannibal films. I couldn't do it. I genuinely...
So you're not going to front load it?
I'm going to spread them out as evenly as possible to avoid any and all heartbreak. Okay? I could only puke 1 week at a time, Ben. And
you'd still be puking 1 week at a time.
Yeah, but I need to spread them apart. My puking, that
3
is.
3 times in a row.
Yeah, I can't do that. There's no fucking way. I'd actually probably start crying. So I guess my point is, I'm starting with Cannibals.
Oh, that's a brave move. I thought you'd put it off to the 3rd week in.
No. Because the sooner I get rid of them, the longer I have to recover after. If that makes sense.
I guess, but definitely, I'm looking at the board right now. Definitely the worst movies for you that we're going to watch.
I'm aware.
This season.
I'm so
in
aware.
this category. So, you could theoretically get the worst movie right off the bat.
That would be an awful way to start the season.
It would be an unfortunate way to start the season.
I have all 3. I can just choose a number. But this is like I have 3 turds sitting in front of me and I have to eat one of them. And I don't want to do any of that.
Russian roulette.
It is. The gun's fully loaded. What's in spot number 2, Ben?
Are you sure?
Don't ask me that. I already said it.
Are you sure?
Ben, I already said the number. It's not like changing my mind's gonna change anything.
Well, you could change the number, and I just haven't told you the name yet.
Ben, I said number 2. What's in spot number 2?
Okay, this isn't necessarily how I wanted to start the season, but Cannibal Holocaust.
Fuck!
Ooh,
This is going to be a long one.
this is gonna be an unfortunate episode, guys
What a good way to start
and
the
gals.
season.
Yeah. This is gonna be funny.
Funny?
Not haha funny, but like funny for me to watch you suffer. Because this is straight up probably the worst movie we're gonna watch on the board this season. So
I was going to say ever, maybe.
and it might be ever. Because I'll tell you right off the bat, anyone listening, this movie is bad.
Yeah, I've heard so much. That's why I'm upset.
Like really, really bad. As far as film go, you know, there's a bunch of films that are like considered like super, super horrific and are like, hey, you probably shouldn't watch this unless you want to watch something really horrific.
Yeah, what is that other one? What, a Serbian film?
Serbian films up there. The Human Centipede films are kind of up there, but not so much. But, you know, films that deal with contents that's just like, why would you watch this? Like, why would you have watching this be an experience you do to yourself? And Cannibal Holocaust is actually on this list. Now, generally speaking, I'm not really interested in watching any of the films on that list.
Me either.
Because I enjoy horror films, but I don't enjoy watching horrific things like that.
Yeah.
And so I don't necessarily think we're going to really watch anything else on that list. But Cannibal Holocaust exists in a weird space where it's pretty impactful, and there's some reasons to watch it that, you know, other films on that, I say list, but in quotation marks, on that list don't have. So that's why we're looking at it. But yeah, it's going to be pretty bad. So straight off the bat, if you have issues with sensitive content, I would not recommend watching this movie or looking up stuff on this film, or, you know, maybe listening to this episode.
Man, I'm so excited.
Yeah. That being said, you ready for the description?
I guess.
All right. Description for this film. Viewer discretion is advised. This film features blatant animal cruelty, obscene footage, and supposedly some real footage of violence.
Jesus Christ.
So if you have any issues with any of that stuff,
Oh my God, is that the name of the episode? Viewer discretion is advised?
probably.
Awesome.
Legitimately, seriously, this movie's, it's bad.
Yeah.
I think I've told this story on the podcast before, but the first time I watched this film, I finished it. I poured myself a drink, an alcoholic drink, and then I took a shower because I felt dirty. Like, it's not great.
I'm glad that we have all of those things ready for me after this movie.
Yes, we do. On a similar note, no matter what happens, I'm going to do the wrap-up for this film. It might just feature me if Bob needs to leave.
Leave? You're in my house.
No, like if you need to go lay down.
Okay.
It's a legitimate concern I've been thinking about.
Can I bring something up before we move on?
Yeah.
I've seen the cover photo for this film, like the art.
Have you? Why?
I was doing something else. I was looking for something else and it came up.
Oh, fair enough.
Does that happen in this movie?
I don't know which cover art. There's a bunch because they're not official.
I don't want to spoil
Don't mention
anything.
anything. Yeah, that was kind of a spoiler that you saw it because some of the cover art's super spoilery.
Well, it just is something that I was like, I don't want to see that happen.
Yeah, but even the most spoilery cover art doesn't feature the most horrific scenes in this film. Just to mention that.
What I saw was really horrific.
Yeah,
though.
well,
Fuck.
also because context is missing.
True.
I think I know which cover art you're thinking of. It gets worse. Anyways, this film came out in 1980.
Okay.
It's an hour and 35 minutes long.
Thank God it's a normal movie.
It's going to feel longer than that
Fuck.
because you're going to be having trouble. It's unrated.
Of course it is.
They were not going to get a rating on this film.
I was about to say, there's no way.
IMDb gave it a 5.8 out of 10. Tomato meter gave it a 67%. And audience score a 61%.
That's surprisingly high for how fucked up this movie allegedly is.
And going back, remember how I mentioned this film has like actual reasons to watch it?
Yeah.
That's because there's some actual cultural impacts from this film. For anyone who doesn't know, this is technically a found footage film.
Whoa.
In part. Only part of it is found footage. And it's really interesting. We'll talk about it after the film. But it is actually one of the first found footage horror films.
That's cool.
I don't think it's technically the first, and I don't think it's even the first found footage film, but it's definitely probably the most famous of the early found footage films. That's why I actually picked my other genre this season, as I thought it would be a nice pairing.
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
If you hadn't pitched if you hadn't gotten Cannibals, would you have put this in early found footage films and made me watch it anyway?
I thought that'd be a funny joke, but I think I said on season 1 that we were probably going to cover Cannibal Holocaust and Cannibals.
Okay.
And I wasn't going to do that to you.
I was just curious, because if you had done that, I think I might have actually shit a brick.
I've been joking about it, but I thought I should work you up to it, because this film's bad.
Yeah.
It deserved the disclaimer. But, so, it has some like horror-related cultural reasons to watch it, but also, and I hate to say that, this film is art. Like, it's
God damn it.
not in the Tetsuo sense, where it's
I know.
an art film, but this film is well shot and made.
That sucks.
And so there's a lot of things when you go, all right, I'm going to forget the horrific bullshit for a second and look at the film, and it's like, oh, there's some positive qualities outside of
that's
the
the worst
horrific
kind of
stuff.
film for this podcast. When it's horrific and horrible and it makes me feel awful, but I still have to go, but that's a good movie, so it's going to get a good rating.
Yep, and
Those are the worst.
that's how I feel about this film. In fact, I was so conflicted the first time I watched this film, because I watched it by myself, and I was like, I need to talk to someone about this. I got my friends, and I made them watch it with me a second time.
Oh my God.
Because I was like, I need to talk to someone about this horrific experience, because it's like, it's really well done, but oh my God. Obviously, no wins or nominations. It ain't getting shit. Notable actors: Robert Kerman as Professor Harold Monroe. And I'm going to bring up Kerman here for a second, because I've never mentioned him by name on this podcast, but I have referred to him, I think, on multiple occasions. If you've heard me talk about it in the past, back in, the day when horror was not looked on kindly, you'd have a lot more porn stars acting in horror.
Oh.
Because they were kind of considered similarly bad.
Okay.
And, horror's always been this way. You could get into the mainstream acting. And so, when horror was considered really bad, it was a lot easier for a porn star to get into more mainstream acting through horror. And Robert Kerman is like the example that always comes to my mind for this, because he did a bunch of porn.
Oh, okay.
And this was one of his early films to get into acting. And so, yeah, if you ever hear me mention, like, oh, yeah, some porn stars acted in films, I'm usually thinking of him, because he's basically the main character of this film.
Cool.
Which is super interesting. I also think he does a good job in this film. But funnily enough, he's actually in a film you've seen.
No way. Hold on.
Not a porno, but an actual film you've seen.
You don't know that.
Actually, you might have saw him in porn.
Yeah,
I don't know.
You don't know what
I don't
looking
know what porn he's done, but it's old, because, this is made in the 80s. But he was the tugboat captain in Spider-Man from 2002.
I thought you were going to mention a film we watched on the podcast.
No!
Not fucking Spider-Man.
He's in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man,
Yeah.
which I can only assume is Sam Raimi making an homage, because Raimi started it off in horror.
True.
Next up, Carl Gabriel York as Alan Yates, another actor who's been in some kind of big roles. He was the SIM tech in Apollo 13.
I never seen that.
Which, great movie. It's about the Apollo mission, the failed one. That was super scary for the astronauts. But yeah, he plays a not a major character, but like a notable character in that, which is, I haven't seen that film in years, and I looked up this fact and I was like, oh my God, I need to go watch Apollo 13 again, because I'm going to be thinking of this character in like Cannibal Holocaust, and it's going to be weird. Luca Giorgio Barbareschi as Mark Tommaso. He played Bongo in The Palace. Came out in 2023, so he's still acting. I thought that was
cool.
interesting. Francesca Chiardi as Faye Daniels. She played Lucretia in Death Walks. Perry Perkinen as Jack Anders. If I'm remembering right, I think they misspell his name in the credits of this film.
Oh.
I think they add an extra K. I think that's the only difference, but I could be wrong. He was uncredited as the blonde gravedigger in City of the Living Dead. So that's kind of interesting, because that's a relatively famous film.
Who did that movie?
It's an Italian film, I believe.
Is that a Fulci film?
Am
Am I losing my mind? I could swear that.
I don't know off the top of my head. Yeah, it's a Fulci film.
I thought so. That's one of the ones I was looking at. I want to watch it really bad.
The sequel is The Beyond.
That's
I think
That's
they're related. But City of the Living Dead is very famous.
oh, Zombie 2 is so good.
I don't know if you've seen clips from it, but you'll see clips of it sometimes in other horror films. Salvatore Basile as Chaco. He was a member of Cheyenne's gang, uncredited, in Once Upon a Time in the West. Paolo Poloni as the third executive. He was the old monk in Double Team. And Lionel Pio di Savoia as the second executive. And he was the governor of Tortuga in The Black Corsair. All right. Director of this film is Ruggero Deodato, kind of a notable Italian horror director.
This is an Italian director?
Yes, because this is an Italian film. And this is where I mentioned that some of the most fucked up horror films come from Italy.
No, that's true. We've seen some fucked up Italian films.
It has to do with the fact that kind of like the exploitation horror genre took off there. So especially in like the 60s to the 80s, like so much of exploitation horror films came out of Italy. So there's some pretty horrific stuff. But another film Deodato did, actually 3 years prior, was Last Cannibal World. So he'd actually previously done a cannibal film.
Cool.
And that's actually related to how he ended up doing this one. Specifically, Last Cannibal World was a part of a cannibal trend that was going on in the exploitation cinema scene in Italy at the time. Because, someone had made a film, it had done pretty well. And, you know how that works.
Yeah.
And, Deodato had done Last Cannibal World. It did fairly well. And he was contacted by some West German film distributors who were like, hey, do something worse and we'll distribute it.
Oh.
Because, for exploitation, there's a lot of times this thought that the more controversial kind of thing you make, the more people will talk about it and then see it.
Any price is good price.
Yep. It's the classic any publicity is good publicity kind of thing, which is...
I mean, yeah, that's why Sharknado got a lot of money made.
Yeah, I mean... But it can get fucked up when you lean into the any part.
Sure.
Because you can be like, oh, I'm just going to make something really, really horrific, and people are going to talk about it because it's really fucked up. I mean, that's
kind of what happened here.
That's kind of what happened here, but that's also why, like, stuff like Human Centipede has a bunch of sequels.
I mean, Terrifier 2, that's a big part of why it got really popular, was because people were, like, saying, like, oh, it's so fucked up, I passed out in the theater or threw up. Same thing.
Yeah. Writer Gianfranco Clarisi, I think that's how you pronounce his name. Most of these names are Italian. I struggle with that, so sorry if I'm pronouncing anything wrong. He's also written Devilfish in 1984. Budget was estimated at $100,000.
That is low.
Yeah, but that's also pretty decent, all things considered.
That's low by today's standards, but in 1980, that's a good chunk of change, especially for like a horror movie.
Yeah, and a foreign picture.
Yeah, that was my other thing. It's Italian.
As far as box office goes, it's unknown.
Okay.
Because I couldn't find any very good statistics. This did not play in a lot of theaters.
Oh, I wonder why.
Well, we'll get into that. There's reasons.
Oh, God.
There's other reasons this is famous outside of the any publicity is, good publicity stuff. But while I couldn't find any exact statistics, from what I could find from like hearsay and people talking about it, it did very, very well.
Really?
Deodato has said in some interviews that it's made like $200 million.
Holy shit.
I'm not sure what his time frame was for that, but he's like come out and been like, yeah, it's made like that much.
God bless.
So yeah, it's done very well. Like there's a reason it's well known. Like I said, country of origins, Italy. Tagline, this is one of the weird things, and I kind of touched on this earlier, but there's not really posters for this film. Most of the posters I could find seemed like they were custom for different releases of the film on like VHS. Because you know how VHS is. There was a bunch of bootleg stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Especially for films like this that are hard to get your hands on.
Mm-hmm.
We'll describe it that way. So there's a lot of different cover art. It's very, very different. It's also an Italian feature, so there's a lot of Italian stuff. Point being, there's no like one tagline. So if you go onto like IMDb or something, you can find a bunch. A bunch of them are really interesting, but the one I'm going to mention, because I did actually see it on one poster, was "They eat and they are eaten."
Great.
Which is just great. All right, so to get into some of my actual facts here, because I do have a bit to discuss, because part of, I think, watching this film is understanding some of the facts around how it was made to justify actually watching it, because you do need some justification. Like I said, it is pretty horrific, and I know I'm repeating myself, but I do want to emphasize that for anyone who's thinking about watching it. But first thing to note is that this film is set in the Amazon for large parts of the film. That's where, the Cannibal Holocaust happens. And the scenes set in the Amazon are, very interestingly enough, filmed there.
Oh, that's actually really cool.
Yeah, because it's cheaper to film in an actual rainforest than it is
to make a rainforest.
So it's shot in the rainforest of Colombia. And the actors used in the film are a mix of locals interacting with, generally speaking, inexperienced American and Italian actors who were hired, I believe, mostly in New York, and then flown down there. And, for anyone who's wondering, the cannibals are supposed to be like native tribes, which is fairly offensive, generally speaking. But my understanding is, I don't know if they were actually played by like native tribes. I'm pretty sure they were just locals living in the town that they painted up and put in costume. But with that being said, I think what's really interesting to note about this film is, even though it's an Italian feature, it's shot in English originally, because Deodato wanted it to be more approachable to like a wider audience. And it's easier to sell a film that's in English to multiple different countries because it's a universal language. So that's important to note. But because it's shot in English, there's some issues with it being an Italian film. And very specifically, for it to be an Italian film, Deodato actually had to get 2 native Italian speakers as stars in the film for it to count as an Italian production, which I thought was really interesting when I was reading up on the film. That not something interesting. I knew he had to do.
I would just assume that if an Italian studio made it, it was then considered an Italian film.
That's what you'd think, but no, you need a certain amount of native Italian actors. And again, you have to remember this gets super complicated because like they did casting in New York, it's shot in Colombia.
Yeah.
The distributors are from West Germany.
Jesus Christ.
It's a fairly international film, and you can tell it feels fairly international, which does, I think, help its marketability as much as there can be, because it feels like a very European film, all things considered.
Okay. I do have a question before we move on. Because this was shot in English, do they ADR the audio in like they would normally for an Italian feature? Or is it like all there?
I don't know, like off the top of my head, because I'm trying to think about watching the film. The audio feels a little bit weird at times. Like it's got that ADR weirdness to it. So part of me wants to say it's ADR, but I never found anything while I was researching that.
I was just curious.
Explicitly said it was ADR into the film. But then again, some of the actors, when they're talking, don't sound like they are ADR. They sound like it's actually them speaking in the scenes. And so my guess is it's a mix. So people who are Italian and have heavy accents, or
they probably ADR'd them.
Spanish native speakers, they probably ADR'd English dialogue in. People who are native English speakers are probably just speaking in the film.
Okay.
I believe that's probably how they did it. If you remember, we can talk about it later when we actually finish the film, if you're still here for the wrap-up.
I'll be somewhere.
I think you might be in your bed. Next up, the film premiered on the 7th of February, 1980 in Milan, and showed for 10 days before it was taken out of theaters. And it was taken out of theaters very specifically because it was seized by the local government.
That's how you know you made a good film. When the local government seizes it.
No, that's not how you know you made a good film. You know you made a good film because the director, Deodato, was brought up and arrested on obscenity charges for the film.
Whoa!
It was considered so obscene that he broke the law for like filming it and putting it on camera.
Holy shit.
And to make matters worse, because, obscenity charges are not great,
No.
but Deodato was also additionally drawn up on multiple accounts of murder because there was a rumor going around that the deaths in the movie were actually real.
Whoa.
Because, I'm going to be honest right now, they are fairly convincing.
That's
they look
wild.
pretty real. And there was a lot of rumors going around this film was a snuff film, and Deodato killed the actual actors. This was not helped by the fact that when he signed on his actors, the ones who die on screen had to have like an additional part in their contract that was like, hey, you're not allowed to appear publicly for interviews or anything for up to like a year after the film releases.
Holy shit.
So no one could find the actors, and they thought they were dead.
Oh my god.
He did get out of the charges eventually because he had to like call them up. He was like,
Please help.
come to court and be like, hey, I'm not dead. So, that is kind of...
Holy fuck.
It's part of what makes this film so famous is the fact that, like...
No, that's crazy.
It got released and it actually tricked people. And, we talk about Blair Witch a lot and, the cultural impact there of, oh yeah, this popularized found footage movies, but also the fact that when Blair Witch came out, people
thought it was real.
People thought it was real. And I think for a modern day audience of, horror and stuff, we generally think that's the first time and the only time that's happened. But no, it's happened before that. And Cannibal Holocaust is a very good example of not only has a similar event happened of people thinking, oh, this film's real, but it's gone much farther than, Blair Witch ever did.
God bless.
Like, actual murder charges were brought up. They were dropped, but still. And I think that leads us into our next fun point of banning. This film has been banned in a lot of places.
That makes sense.
In fact, it's been banned in over 50 countries.
That's a lot of countries.
Including the United States. It was
Oh.
banned here for a while.
It's not banned now, though, right?
No, it's not banned anymore.
Okay.
But for a couple years, it was banned in the United States. And again, up like more than 50 countries.
That's like more than a third of the world's countries.
And in fact, it's still in the advertising of like been banned in over 50 countries. Again, part of what makes it so well known. Again, any publicity. Obviously, a lot of those bans have since been dropped as we as a culture have become more accepting of
Crazy shit.
horrific stuff.
Yeah.
Because they're like, you have free will. You can watch that if you want.
We don't recommend it.
We don't recommend it, but we're not going to stop you.
Yeah.
Which is, interesting, but it's bad for it to get banned in the United States.
Oh, yeah.
Some countries have pretty strict obscenity laws.
Mhm.
England's a very, very good example of that. Have you ever heard of the Video Nasties list?
Mm-mm.
It was a very famous list of, like, if any film had certain content that was above a certain level of obscenity, it would get banned in England.
That's wild.
It's a very, very famous list. I think a lot of it's been revoked nowadays, but especially in the VHS area, it was like this really notable thing. But this was like top of the Video Nasties list in England.
Love that.
But, United States has always been a lot looser for content.
Yeah, I'm honestly surprised it was ever even banned here.
We have our own restrictions, especially back in the 80s,
Sure.
because it was the 80s. I mean, Satanic Panic and everything.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
the fact that it got banned here, I think, should tell you how wild this film is. All right, next thing up, let's touch again on the whole found footage part of this film. So the way they do found footage in this movie is kind of weird, and you'll have to tell me afterwards if you like it or not. But the non-found footage elements of this film are influenced by the films of, I believe his name's pronounced, Gualtiero Jacopetti, who is considered the originator of Mondo films. Are you familiar with those?
No.
So Mondo films are sometimes known as shockumentaries,
Oh, God.
and it's a subgenre that is a combination of both exploitation and documentary filmmaking, and is made to resemble pseudo-documentaries, but it focuses on sensational and often taboo subjects.
Okay.
So we, on a previous season, covered pseudo-documentary horror films.
Yeah, we watched what? Like the Poughkeepsie tapes, The Bay. There's one more. Lake Mungo?
Yep. And, those are kind of similar, but Mondo films is just very explicitly kind of in the exploitation genre. tends to be more explicit scenes than we've covered.
I don't know. The Poughkeepsie tapes gets pretty explicit.
The Poughkeepsie tapes might be closer to the Mondo genre, but it's very specifically also like an Italian thing. But if you're ever wondering if there's a word for shockumentaries, Mondo film. And, while we're talking about the non-found footage parts of this film versus the found footage parts of this film, I want to mention it right now because I think it's such a cool choice by the director. They're shot different. Obviously, there's camera stuff to trick you, but they're shot on different cameras.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's very, very, very evident, and it also helps with some of the realism.
Oh, God.
Because, first of all, it makes it grainier footage during the found footage parts.
Sure.
So it's harder to tell it isn't real. But, more importantly, it's a cool effect. Like most modern found footage films, especially, the documentaries we watch don't use different film types.
No, it's
but this one
normally the
does.
same camera across, and they just switch to a different POV, basically. Or,
Which
moving around differently.
feels crappy.
Yeah.
But this one switches. If you're wondering, the parts of the film that are non-found footage are 35 millimeter, and the found footage parts are 16 millimeter.
Oh!
Because a movie camera was 35, and a handheld camera that you'd use for found footage, not found footage, but for I got a shoulder mount, would be 16.
That's cool.
So I thought that was really cool. Next thing to note is kind of in the legacy of this film. It was originally written under the title Green Inferno. That's the original script title. I see Bob is like, wait a second. So obviously that title was changed, but it would become the name of the fictional documentary that the found footage is made into, right? So they do kind of keep it. But it is also worth mentioning that another film directed years later by another notable director, Eli Roth, was made under a very similar name. Very specifically, the 2013 film, The Green Inferno. Which is Eli Roth's spiritual successor to this film.
Oh, that's so cool. We're going to get there, I guess.
Because Eli Roth is a big fan of Deodato. He loves Italian cinema, and
we have yet to watch an Eli Roth
big
film.
fan of Deodato. You can find some cool pictures of them together.
That's cool,
It's kind of cool. This is kind of where we're going to get into some of the darker aspects of this film.
Jesus Christ, Ben.
So, I mentioned there's some animal cruelty in this film.
Yeah, I was like, that is... Look, we already did that category last two seasons ago.
That wasn't the animal cruelty category.
We're close.
But it was close. But that wasn't the focus.
That wasn't the focus, but it was definitely a big part of that entire category.
Are you aware of what the animal cruelty in this film is?
Vaguely. I'm assuming some Friday the 13th-esque type of animal cruelty.
Yeah, they kill some animals.
Yeah.
Pretty
what I was getting at.
Graphically. Which, fair warning, guys, it's not fun. It very much isn't fun. And, I'm never going to support a film where that's something they decide to do because I think it's really shitty. But I will note that for anyone wondering, I hate to say this, but there is a slight benefit to it in that it ups the realism of the film because, it tricks your brain into seeing something that's, real, and then everything that's not real feels more real in comparison because you've seen the stakes. Anyways, going back to how horrific this film is, I want to point this out right now that, none of the actors were happy with any of the animal death stuff. People signed on to this film and they had contracts to do this film, but people were not happy with the conditions on set. The people refused to be in certain scenes because they were like, I'm not participating in this.
Damn.
Some actors participated in scenes and it fucked them up emotionally. And then obviously general conditions on the set weren't great. They're filming in the jungle and stuff, but it's also been noted that Deodato was apparently just remorseless on set. There is a particular bad story where one of the female actors was supposed to get topless, and she was not comfortable with that. And Deodato grabbed her, took her off set, and screamed at her until she did it.
That sucks.
Yeah. Additionally to all of this, to make, matters worse, unfair payment practices as well.
Love to hear that.
So, just absolutely horrific set conditions. And no one was happy. Now, if you're wondering what Deodato's argument for, the animal cruelty was, because, he explicitly chose to put it in the film, it was apparently, and this is allegedly, supposed to help the film do well in Asia.
Huh.
Because apparently someone who had been doing this cannibal stuff, like producers and stuff, noticed that the films with a lot of violence did better there, especially when they featured like really graphic stuff.
Huh.
So Deodato was like, yes,
Wide audience.
I'm going to make this film extra horrific so it does better there. I don't know how true that is.
I don't know.
If you're wondering where I heard that, I'm going to blame Joe Bob from The Last Drive-In. Because he has a
Blaming
special
Joe
on
Bob
this.
Briggs, a classic.
And he mentions that fact. And that's the only place I found reference to that. But I do think it was interesting, so I wanted to mention it here. Because I think it's a shitty reason, but...
Oh, it's definitely shitty.
It is a reason, I guess. I
Sure.
guess.
It is a reason. You're not wrong, Ben.
But I'm going to add on a positive note.
Oh, great. A positive note
Because
before
I
I
think,
watch this horrific film.
You know, we should end this part with a silver lining, you know? Get Bob nice and prepped.
I'm so excited.
The soundtrack of this film
Oh.
was made by composer Riz Ortolani, and it's absolutely amazing.
Oh, cool.
The soundtrack to this film is great.
That's a good... I guess that's cool, man.
The opening song, and we'll hear it, is actually kind of beautiful. I hate to say that. But yeah, the soundtrack's really good. Silver lining. There's at least one part of this film that you'll have fun with.
I'm really glad. I'm really glad. You know, you guys might have noticed I'm not really talking that much during this pre-movie thing, mostly because that was a lot of stuff.
I had a lot.
I just learned a lot of things. But
I
also,
didn't mention everything. You can go do your own research if you want, but I tried to do a good spiel.
I've been trying to emotionally prepare myself throughout this entire thing.
I've been trying to emotionally prepare you for like 7 seasons too. So you're going in as, I think, prepared as you can be.
But is it enough? Will I make it?
I think you're going to throw up.
Fuck.
I also think you're just going to be horrified. Once again, if Bob is not present for the back half of this recording,
I'll at least vaguely be alive. I'll try to at least sit in front of the mic. If I say anything, debatable.
I don't know if you'll be in the room. So if he's not here when we come back, I'll tell you. So sorry in advance if that's the case. But we're going to go to the movie now.
Yeah. Well, see you guys in a minute. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We just finished watching Cannibal Holocaust.
Yeah. I'm glad Bob's still here. I didn't want to do this.
No, I made it. I didn't throw up.
Yeah.
I came close. I think Ben saw me at one point look at the trash can, look at the TV, and just like shake my head. I was not.
Yeah. It's
having that good of a time.
I'm glad you're here for the wrap up. I didn't want to do it by myself, but what'd you think, Bob?
Okay, look. This movie's horrific.
Yeah.
You see some pretty fucked up shit. Shit that I did not anticipate. Like stuff that
No.
I was shocked to witness.
You hear Cannibal Holocaust and you assume, okay, this is going to be a movie focusing on cannibalism. And it's really not.
Cannibalism is there. It's around.
there, but it's secondary to all the other horrific acts.
Yeah. It's a way better film than I want to say it is worth.
And that is the other issue with it.
That's my problem. It's like, yeah, this movie's horrific. Lots of horrible things happened. It made me see things I'd never wanted to see in my life. But at the end of the day, I went, damn, that's a good movie.
It's structurally well done, which sucks because it gives it merit as a film.
Yeah.
And I don't really want this film to have merit because, like Bob said, it's horrific. And it features some of the most horrific stuff I've ever seen on film.
Yeah.
And I don't know how bad Bob thought it was, but, you know, I watched this film. This is, I think, my 3rd viewing of it, which is 3 too many. But every time I finish it, I just feel gross.
See, I don't feel gross. I'm, like, sad.
Maybe that's a better description. I just feel like...
I feel empty inside having witnessed what I just watched.
I just feel empty and worn out, and I'm just like...
Yeah, I'm emotionally exhausted right now.
That was unpleasant, and I just want to do something else.
Like, it was unpleasant, but it was made up for by the fact that, and maybe I'm a fucking psychopath for saying this, some parts of this film are kind of funny. Like, enjoyably funny. In, like, a weird way.
But it's explicitly the non-horrific sequences.
Yes, I'm not saying the horrific scenes are funny, but there's stuff that happens outside of the horrifying events that I genuinely go, well, that's, like, really enjoyable and funny.
No, I mean, you can tell Deodato's a good director.
Yeah.
And you can tell the scriptwriter's a decent scriptwriter. It's just the content is bad.
No, yeah.
On that note, though, I think going to go into a brief rundown of the premise, plot,
Sure.
usual stuff. So that's going to contain some spoilers, obviously. And then we'll go into the spoiler section. That's going to be us really talking about the film and I think getting into some of the specifics about stuff. We're not going to really need a spoiler section, so we're not going to do it, in part because I don't really want to talk about the specifics of some of the bad stuff in this film.
Yeah.
It's just not something I want to discuss. But, if you're still considering watching the film, spoiler warnings from here on out. With that being said, the way this film is designed is very interesting. In fact, it's one of the only films I know that is built this way. Very specifically, I mentioned earlier, this is a found footage film, kinda. And that really has to do with the structure of the movie. Basically, the first half, and I do mean half because it's pretty solidly the first half of the movie, has to do with I'm just going to refer to him as the main character, the professor, the guy who's played by Kerman. Do you know the character name?
Monroe,
going into the Amazon looking for these 4 documentarians. They're like, what, in their 20s?
Yeah,
who went missing there. And so, the first half of the film is him going to Colombia, getting together a expedition crew, and then going into the jungle and tracking their trail and then finding... They're, of course, dead bodies because they've been missing for,
2 months.
2 months at the point that his expedition was sent out.
Mm-hmm.
Assumedly, by the time he finds them, it's probably...
been 3.
3 at least. And, he manages to find their bodies, and because of the way he handles situations with the local tribes, he manages to recover their footage, the reels of film that were unopened, and he brings that back to the States. And his expedition was funded by, I think, New York University?
Yeah, it was NYU or something.
And a film broadcast company. I think probably the parent company that sent out the documentary.
Yeah, I think it's called the BDC.
Yeah. Whatever the expedition was funded by. I think it was funded by the BDC, which is the company that also sent out the professor. And so, I think that company owns all the footage.
Mm-hmm. And
they asked the professor to, go through it, put it together into a documentary that they're going to call The Green Inferno. And so the back half of the film is the professor kind of going through this footage, and we as the audience watching it along with him as he kind of presents it to the executives who run this company. And he's like, guys, this footage is fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
We should not show this on television. It's very exploitative. So yeah, if that sounds interesting, we're going to get into the actual body of this film.
Yeah.
Excitement levels high, guys. So, straight off the bat, the cinematography in this film is very well done.
It's super cool.
It's a lot of professional shots in the first half of the film
Mm-hmm.
that make everything look like a very professional movie, which is shocking when you realize that they're filming in an actual jungle.
Yeah, and it's really cool that they're in the actual jungle.
They don't go super deep, assumedly, into the Amazon. From what I heard, they're pretty close to a local town. Not in the movie universe, but in real life. But it's really hard to get all these steady shots they do, and the camera just into all the places they're going, because you have to remember this is a big 36 millimeter shoulder mount camera.
Yeah.
So all of that's very impressive. They have some really good aerial shots. They have shots of framing stuff. They have interposed shots of wildlife.
Yeah, all the wildlife stuff really helps really immerse you in the environment. It makes it feel... You made a very good point when we were doing the pre-movie stuff. Like Ben said, animals die in this movie. That, on top of the fact that there are tons of shots of real live animals in the jungle, makes this feel very real. You're really immersed in the environment, which makes when bad things happen hit really fucking hard.
Yeah. The stuff that's fake seems real in comparison. Yeah. And then we get to the second half of the movie, which is shot on 16 millimeter, and they go so hard on making it look like actual found footage.
Yeah.
Some of the footage doesn't have audio because the characters didn't put on their mics. Some of it has exposure damage.
Yeah.
Just from, generally being exposed to the elements. So like the color's off, saturation is weird. Sometimes stuff is out of focus. It's really shaky. It's basically has all the, I'm going to say, unprofessionalism that the first half lacked.
Yeah.
And they stand in extreme contrast to each other, not just because of the quality of the film, but just the techniques behind how these two halves of the film are shot. And it really does help the movie's, I guess, sense of realism and just general impressiveness, because it really does take a lot to have that very, very distinct difference between two pieces of film shot roughly the same time by assumedly the same cinematographer. And then, this great cinematography is also coupled with the soundtrack.
Oh, man.
And I said this before, the soundtrack of this film is straight up probably the main redeeming feature of the whole feature.
I don't know, man.
Because it's just so well done.
It is really good. And they do this really cool thing. The opening scene, and maybe it's in the outtakes, I don't remember if I clipped it, is just like shots of the rainforest from like above, from an airplane or something.
Yeah, I think it's someone flying assumedly a pontoon plane, because we see it a couple times.
Yeah.
But it could be a helicopter.
But they're flying over, just getting a bunch of shots of the forest and the jungle and everything.
It's like the Amazon basin.
Yeah, and there's this really beautiful music that plays over this really beautiful shot, and it really gets you into the mood for, the expedition, the journey into the jungle, doing all this stuff.
It's the theme of this movie. And
yeah.
It's probably the most played piece.
And they bring it back quite a few times throughout the movie. It's this really, like, nice, I don't want to say somber, but it's sort of like...
It's got plenty of strings, and it has this nice, like, classical somber feel.
Yeah.
And then it occasionally picks up with guitar, which is so bizarre because some of the guitar pieces sound like... we get to hear a clip of the end theme at the very end of the movie, and the guitar, when it picks up, kind of sounds like Country Roads for a second. That same, like, I don't know, laid back kind of...
but it's very chill. It's very, like, not... scary or intense.
No, it's pretty.
It's pretty, and they play it over some of the most horrific things you've ever seen in your fucking life, and you're just witnessing it going, it's whiplash in the moment, and it's so wild because they start you off with it and they end you with it, and it's so good.
Yeah, it creates, like Bob said, a whiplash effect, and I think for me it causes a weird, like, disassociation.
Yeah.
Between the events of the film, but also the events of the people watching the film. So one of the things we haven't mentioned here yet is that, like I said, the first half of the film is very much a classical movie about finding the footage, and the back half is, there's a framing device of the professor putting together the footage with the help of an editor and showing it to people, but the back half is traditionally a found footage film.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things to note is the front half of the film is almost diegetic. Like, there's very little added music, except for in a few sequences where they find something shocking, and it's like sound effects rather than music.
It's much less music, more like, what is the word I'm looking for? Like what they do in something like, it's like this. It's like white noise. It's like this like weird tonal thing.
It's
but
like
it's not
a
music.
synthy tonal sound.
Yeah.
To be like something jumped out at you. But the back half of the film, because it's supposed to be a documentary, and because we hear one of the characters, I think it's the editor, establish that there's no sound here. He's like, yeah, I edited in music. And first of all, it's a great in-universe explanation for why there's music in the found footage part. But it also shows the fact that, there is this sense of removal because the editor, the BDC people went in and edited this music over these horrific sequences.
These awful things.
To, in essence, I think give the audience of the found footage part some removal from the stuff, because you have to remember there's a bunch of horrific stuff in the found footage section. That's where most of the bad stuff is. And this big company is intending for it to be shown to a wide audience.
And it's real in universe.
Yeah.
That is fucking bananas. I could not imagine, like, why would you ever show this to people if it's all, like, if you're in this world and this is all real, stop.
And I think that's a nice jumping off point to one of the ham-fisted messages of this film. Very specifically, there is a commentary, especially in the back half when they've, recovered this footage, of it's almost like an anti-exploitation message.
Yeah.
Now, it's very specifically against exploitative media practices rather than exploitation film. But it's such a weird message for this movie to have, because this is like peak exploitation film made by an exploitation director, and the film's preaching at you, hey, we shouldn't take advantage of other people for media content for us to watch.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's a weird message because it doesn't feel like it necessarily works. In some ways, the movie makes the point of, oh, look, these messed up BDC people wanting to play like the death of animals and people on national television. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, but this is the movie made by an exploitation director who, through horrific exploitative practices, made that footage.
Yeah.
It's a little odd. And it's just a weird message to have in the back half of this film. In a similar vein, because we're on the topic of messages, I think the message that comes through a little bit stronger, even if it is also kind of cheesy, is this idea of, I describe like Western versus non-Western society, but they're really going for a civilized versus uncivilized kind of approach.
Yeah.
The professor's our main characters through the whole film, and is in essence following in the footsteps of these documentarians, this group of 4 kids who died. And if you haven't picked up on it yet, they did some bad stuff. That's why there's bad stuff in their found footage. But, the professor was able to do the same track that they did.
Yeah.
And go through the extra steps of like having to deal with traumatized peoples that he's interacting with, because, he's going in after this documentary crew. But he's able to like succeed where others failed because he's capable of empathy and understanding. And the film uses that as a jumping off point, very, very in your face of, these people aren't savages. They just have a different culture and a different understanding.
Yeah.
But us going in and taking advantage of them is uncivilized. In fact, the movie, I'm just going to tell you right now because I don't think it's a big spoiler. The movie ends on a very cheesy line of the professor walking out of a building. He puts his corncob pipe in his mouth, which is great character prop, by the way. He even has a belt holster for it. But he puts the pipe in his mouth and he's like, I wonder who the real cannibals are.
Yeah. It's just a very, like, cool juxtaposition to the back half of the film because, of course, we see the professor go through, interact with all these tribes first before we get to see what the other people did, the people who make the documentary. So seeing him succeed where they failed before we get to see what they did, and seeing how he interacted with these people and how by following their traditions and interacting with them normally, he actually succeeded in his mission, and then seeing what they did and how they fucked up is so... It's just interesting because normally you would see it the other way around in a film. You would see a bunch of people fail and then someone come in and do it the right way. But seeing it done the right way first and then getting to see what they did makes everything they did feel so much worse because they could succeed if they weren't fucking jackasses.
And it's also, it feels so much worse because we know for a fact the professor had a harder time of it.
Yeah, because they already fucked everything up before he got there.
So everyone's already on edge. Everyone's ready to fight.
Yeah.
And yet he's still able to pull through. And, like, recover stuff, which he definitely shouldn't have been able to.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he does some impressive feats of, I guess, impressing the natives.
Yeah.
To recover the footage. On that note, though, I think we do have to get into some of the more unpleasant parts of this film. Because, it's unavoidable when you're talking about, a review of this film to not touch on it.
Yeah.
So, I think we touched on this for a second, but most of the horrific sequences are centered in the back half of the film.
Yeah.
That isn't to say there isn't some unpleasant content in the first half, but its inclusion feels more like the director wanted it in and less because the characters are doing horrific stuff. Very specifically, I think there's 2 or 3 sequences of pretty horrific violence and then a animal death in the first half of the film, and then everything else is centered in the back half. So definitely the first half of the film is a bit more palatable.
While we're still here talking about the horrific stuff in the first half, that stuff I think is, while it's very tonally not the same as the front half of the film, because the front half is very like exploration-y, like, you know, it's tonally different. I think it's super important because including these horrific things in the front half of the film sort of preps you for the switch up for the second half of the film, where you just get absolutely bombarded like nonstop by awful, awful stuff happening.
Yeah, there's a gradual build up, I think, in the difficulty of the content and the quantity as you go on. But I think you're right when you say the stuff in the first half is necessary because, you know, it sets the stakes, right? It shows that, you know, even though the professor's doing everything right, this isn't
this is not a walk in the park.
Yeah. Like, there's very much... It creates this idea that, you know, the professor, this guy who has the best chance, could still mess up. Like, you can still mess up and die. And I think it's done very explicitly. Like you said, to prep the audience. Also, just to keep the tone the same. You know, that's kind of Deodato being like, let's throw this stuff in. But I think it's also to establish this idea that the film builds early on, that maybe these documentarians are dead because of circumstances out of their control.
Yeah.
In fact, the first clips we see of them is from this newscast right when they left. And it sets them up as like this nice group of lovable kids.
Yeah.
Which the back half then jumps from and slowly makes them seem worse and worse. Which I personally think makes the horrific acts they're committing come off worse and worse as they get more involved with them.
Oh, it's horrific.
But, you know, back on the topic of like the content, not to brush on it too briefly, but I'm going to try and not get too in depth because I just don't want to. The animal deaths in this are not great, primarily because sometimes you kill things for, you know, hunting reasons and stuff. And the idea when you're hunting animals is you should use all the animal's parts and stuff. You know, you don't waste anything because that's respectful. But more importantly, you try to kill something without cruelty involved. The idea is quick and efficient, make sure nothing suffers. The problem with the animal deaths in this film is not only is it fucked up to kill an animal for a movie and like no other reason.
Yeah.
That just feels gross and wrong.
I mean, it's literally murder for murder's sake.
Yeah, like even if you're going to use like the animal parts afterwards and eat them, the fact that you're doing it for a movie is messed up. That's not the big issue with the animal deaths in this film. The big issue is most of them are drawn out for the sake of being drawn out. In fact, the first death of an animal in the film, it does happen in the first half, is probably the most horrific because it's the most slow. Like that animal,
it definitely suffered.
That animal suffered in a way that some of the later ones didn't.
Yeah.
Additionally, and I just want to mention it now, I don't want to say play with the dead animal parts. Some of the times it's more, I don't know, technical than that. Like there is sequences of them, what would you say, field stripping the animal?
Yeah, like butchering them.
Butchering it. But because it's on film, it just feels like they're playing with the dead animal. And it's just so unpleasant.
Yeah.
And, you know, if that sounds gross, don't watch this movie. It's unpleasant. Now, obviously, the animal deaths are really bad because they're real, but then there's the actual violence. And, you know, straight up, it's a lot of people getting killed in pretty drawn-out, slow ways.
Yeah.
Like lots of clubbing to death and stuff. But I think what makes a lot of the really horrific stuff really hard to watch is there's just a lot of sequences of people just being in pain and like slow, torturous fates, coupled with what I think is, for most people, some of the most uncomfortable thing, which is just sexual violence.
Yeah.
Especially towards the back end of the film.
Well, because they bring it up pretty early on, apparently, according to Monroe and some other people, the natives in this place are very like sacred of virginity, and that's like a big thing for them. So like seeing these horrific things that have to do with sex is just like it I guess it makes sense in universe that this is happening.
I don't even know if Monroe says that. I think that's Alan who says
Does Alan make that up?
I think Alan makes that up. I
Oh.
think Monroe specifically doesn't put anything on the natives.
Mm.
He observes stuff and he's like, I think this is what's happening, but
Mhm.
he doesn't say, oh, they're obsessed with virginity.
Mm.
That was explicitly Alan in that horrific sequence
Yeah.
where the lady was.
Yeah.
Yeah, but lots of, especially towards the end, sexual related violence, and
It is horrific.
horrific. It's very uncomfortable because it's drawn out, and so if you have, first of all, if you have triggers with any of this stuff, you should not watch this film.
No.
I hope I warned you enough at the beginning.
I don't know if there's enough warnings you can give. We've been giving them all episode.
But even if you don't have triggers, some of it's so just drawn out and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's really not pleasant. Outside of that, though, is there anything else you want to touch on?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, one of the coolest parts about this film, and we've kind of talked about it, but I really want to elaborate a little bit more, is at the beginning of the movie, these people making this documentary are set up as victims in this situation.
Yeah, like I said earlier, they come off as lovable
Yeah.
because we explicitly learned later on they are a professional documentary crew. It's this 4 people, and they've worked together before. They've made another documentary for the BDC. But they're used to interacting in front of the camera. So this whole news sequence, the first time we see them, they are acting a specific way on camera to make themselves seem lovable.
And the film slowly, at least once we find the footage.
Yeah, because that's the actual footage of them.
Yeah. So we spend the whole first 45 minutes thinking that these people are victims of assumedly native violence that was outside of their control. These natives are innately violent or going to attack people or whatever.
Or at the very least, something happened outside of anyone's control.
Exactly. And they died. The fact that we get to the actual footage and it slowly reveals to us that they died because they did horrible things to these native people is so... It's just such the moment that it switches is such a... It's whiplash in the best way possible.
It's because they build up to it. It's a slow reveal, but it feels like it happens suddenly. And part of this comes from the fact that one of the first things we learn once the footage is recovered is one of the, I think again it's BDC executives, is showing Monroe some footage of the documentarian's previous film. What is it? I think A Road to Hell.
Yeah, I think that's what it's called.
Which they shot in...
I think it's Africa.
About, I think it's some war going on at the time, a warlord. It's very horrific footage.
Yeah.
I legitimately think it's real footage from some of the conflicts in Africa at the time. So I do think there might be some actual dead people in it. It makes me very uncomfortable, honestly. But the executive shows Monroe the footage and makes the comment that, oh, yeah, this isn't footage Alan shot of, a warlord coming through the area and soldiers fighting. No, Alan paid for that.
Yeah.
He paid people to shoot this footage
Mm-hmm.
for him. He's staging stuff. And it's this first little inclination that, oh, this crew is willing to go to unethical lengths. Unethical from a filmmaking perspective as far as documentary ethics go. But he's furthermore willing to go to lengths of murder and extreme violence. And like Bob said, there's this moment where it just hits you of, oh,
yep,
they're willing to go this far. Because I don't think it's till halfway through the found footage section that we really see the 4 documentary people. Alan's the leader.
Yeah.
Faye is his girlfriend. She's the only woman in the group, which I think is a very notable point for as much sexual violence happens later in the film. And then Jack, and then, do you remember the 4th guy's name?
Mark.
But it's only halfway through the found footage section that they really start to commit some real violence against other people.
Yeah.
And it's like a switch.
I guess my point is, and the reason I bring it up, is the fact that it's such a slow reveal and a slow turn makes the entirety of the... it's only an hour and a half, but it feels so much longer.
Yeah.
But in a good way?
I forgot how long this film was before I did my notes, and I was thinking it was 2 hours long.
That's what I expected, and it felt like it was a 2 hour... Because it's so... This film is, in and of itself, an agonizing experience.
Yeah.
And it's so drawn out and awful, but in a good way. Like, it needs to be like that to bring the points across.
Yeah, not to mention the whole framework of having what is essentially two very different and separate movies makes it seem like you've taken one full story at like an hour and another full story at an hour and mushed them together.
Yeah. It's like, oh my God. Ooh.
But yes, the film does do a really good job with pacing and structure and stuff.
Yeah.
Again, it's... I hate to say it, but it's well done, you know?
No, yeah,
Like,
it's genuinely well constructed and well thought out and plotted.
Yeah, and it has cool ideas. I mean, like I said, this is one of the few films I've actually found that has them find the found footage and the struggle that is. That's amazing.
Yeah, and that whole first, like, 45 is genuinely really good and, like, well done. And, like, the coolest part about that is it starts out so different from the last, 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah,
and
you're in New York.
You're in New York City. And then you cut to Colombia and you're watching these Colombian soldiers, like, it feels like an action movie.
It does look like something you'd expect Arnie to be in.
Yeah.
Like, it looks like a scene from Predator.
It's really cool to experience so many different things in one film. And all of it to make sense and feel natural and not feel like shoehorned together in a bad way.
Which, again, sucks because this film
is
sucks.
horrific.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really, really cool. I think the last thing I want to touch on is something that, like I said, I think this movie is mildly funny sometimes, even though it's horrific in all of its aspects.
There is some scenes that are specifically put in as jokes. I mean, that's just how the film's made.
But there's this really, I think, hilarious and awesome scene at the end of the film. And I don't know if this is a spoiler, and I'm going to have to cut this, but I'm going to say it anyway because I feel like it. Where they finish reviewing all of the footage, and the BDC executive he picks up the phone to the dude up in the booth that's showing the footage. He says, "Burn it all. No one needs to see this." And I literally started laughing because that's so insane that they even considered showing this to anybody. And by the time they saw it themselves, they went, "Okay, you were right."
I mean, I think it's a striking moment too because you have these, directors who previously, because what happens here, I'll just go into it. Monroe had been pushing for the directors to like shut down this project.
Yeah.
And he was like, all right, I haven't convinced you. I have one reel left that I had to edit myself because the editor didn't want to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
No one else has seen it. I'm going to show it to you, and it's going to convince you. Like, I'm not going to have to say anything. It's obviously what ends up happening to
the crew,
as well as some of the most horrific acts they commit in the entire film. But it's just this interesting moment of, like, these executives were willing to put up with so much, and this was, like, the straw that broke the camel's back.
Mm-hmm.
So it's this shocking moment of, like, oh, you can see these people realizing how much their morals have crumbled.
Yeah.
That they considered, like, showing this to the public and putting their name on it.
Yeah. I mean, whew.
And it is humorous, but it's humorous in a very morbid sense.
Absolutely.
Additionally, it's also kind of messed up because it's this idea of, like, oh, we funded this really horrific thing because we knew how Alan and this crew of people behaved.
Yep.
We knew that they killed people, but we sent them there anyways, and we're just going to bury it now. We're going to get rid of all the evidence that we were associated with this horrific thing.
Yeah.
And so while it is, like Bob said, a little humorous in a morbid way, it's also just, I don't know, fucked up.
Yeah. I mean, that really emphasizes this whole film. Like,
there's a lot of mixed emotions.
It all just comes down to everything is fucked up and none of it mattered because
it doesn't.
None of it matters.
I mean,
and that's why I feel so empty when I finished the film. I was like, damn, that's crazy that he spent all this time going to get this footage. The footage was all horrific and horrible. These people sucked. They died because of literally the consequences of their actions got them killed.
Yeah. I mean, I think the only, like, growth is Monroe kind of comes to this opinion that, like, the world's just a fucked up place.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter who you are.
Mm-hmm.
You can commit atrocities. Yeah.
And, like, he does the right thing in the end, or at least tries to the entire time. He's, like, the best character in the whole film.
Yeah.
Morally, at least.
Kerman does a great job. And
no, he's really good.
This, as far as I'm aware, is not his first, like, acting role
Mhm.
outside of porn. Obviously, he'd done a good bit of that at this point, from what I'm aware of. I think he was a pretty big name at the time. But, this isn't his first film as an actor. I think he actually did some other cannibal films, and that's how Deodato found him. But he does an amazing job.
No, he's really good.
He is very charismatic in just the right way
Mhm.
for Monroe, and he really sells it. That being said, though, recommendations?
Wow. Okay.
Because I can go first if you need me to.
No. Look, if you're into exploitation films and that's something you're interested in, I think this is the first one I've ever seen. This is a wild ride. This is one, and you should watch it if you're into that. If you're into found footage films, this is a weird one because it's half found footage, half not, and that's cool. Like, at least directorially, like cinematography wise, it's just interesting. I think it's really cool. All the found footage stuff is distinct and really well done, because it's like scuffed in the right way.
Yeah, it is some of the most realistic found footage I've ever seen in a found footage film.
Yeah. If you're a fan of seeing fucked up shit, look, some people are into that. I get it. If you're into that, watch this movie. You'll see some pretty realistic fucked up shit.
Yeah. We watched it in HD because, modern equipment and stuff. It still looks fairly realistic.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine watching this on an old film projector or like a VHS where the quality's much lower. It would have been so convincing.
I think those are my recommendations.
Okay. For me, recommendations are weird because, most movies have an audience. But I think this is like the first film where I honestly really can't recommend it to anyone.
I get it.
It's pretty messed up, and I'm not going to look at this film and go, hey, any of you should watch it. I don't think it deserves a recommendation. However, I think certain groups might be interested in watching it, and so I'll mention that here. Very specifically, if you are into the history of horror or found footage, or just maybe like an inspiring director who's thinking about working in either of those genres, I think this is a very important watch, not only because it's very, very early in both of those genres, but it's showing what a well-executed film could be, but also just how much you can push the stakes of a film into like not okay territory. Aside from that, though, like if you're just interested in the movie, like if you want to, for whatever reason, like if you want to push yourself, if you've heard of it and you're like, maybe it's not that bad, I don't know.
Look,
it's a film.
Say is, it was pretty horrific, but I survived, and I'm surprised by that.
Rating? Because that's going to be the hardest part.
You're going to hate me in a second.
I don't think I'm going to hate you.
No, you're going to be upset with me. Because look, yeah, this movie's a horrific mess. You see some super fucked up shit. But we've been saying it the whole time. It's genuinely a good movie. Like, it's well put together. It's plotted out.
I don't like it.
That's it right there, Ben. You nailed it. I don't like this movie, but it's well done.
There's a few sequences where Bob legitimately paused, looked at me, and went, "That's beautiful."
Because it is. And that's weird. And we've been talking about it, but like the slow build up to like revealing that these people that are making the documentary are horrible people, and like they basically get themselves killed.
They're the worst.
Like, and watching them do all this crazy shit and all of the cool stuff with like the natives. And
on an aside though, really quick, you know how sometimes in films where you see bad things that people do and you want them to get their comeuppance?
Yeah.
I didn't even have that.
No.
I just wanted to stop watching them.
No, yeah. Like, like the stuff that happens to them is so bad that even though I'm like, man, they deserve this, they don't deserve this.
I wasn't fulfilled.
No, not at all.
Oh,
it's
God.
so unfulfilling in a really good way in a film because none of this shit fucking matters.
Because you're not supposed to enjoy it because, again, it's making that whole comment on the exploitative film. And
so this is where I'm at. Is like, it was horrific, but it's a really good movie. And I think the fact that I came away from a really awful experience still enjoying it, not enjoying it, respecting it,
I think maybe the way you're trying to frame it is not it's a really good movie, but it's a very well done movie.
No,
'Cause
I
those
would
have
say no. See,
Different implications.
what? Okay,
Because really good implies that you like it, and very well done implies that it's good.
I do like it though.
like good from an objective standpoint. Like you can like something from an objective standpoint
Yeah.
versus
I-
emotional.
I guess my thing is this is the first one we watched on the podcast where I came away feeling super conflicted and very emotionally
Drained.
drained, and it deserves some points for that. And I think the front half of the movie, before we get to all the funny stuff, is really well done and super well shot and well acted and really cool and interesting because they do a lot of really fun stuff with the natives and like technology and like using it to interact with them. And I think that Kerman's performance with like interacting with the natives is super cool. And I also like Chaco and Miguel. They're also really good characters in this movie.
Those are the Professor Monroe's party when he's going into
Yeah,
the
I
jungle.
really like them as characters. I think they're super cool. And then getting to see all these horrific things on the back half and still coming away saying it is a good movie means something. Like, there's something to be said about the fact that even though I saw some of the most fucked up shit I've ever seen in my life, I still came out and said, man, that's a good film. That's where I'm sitting. Like, I'm in such a weird spot.
I mean, there's a reason I've watched it now 3 times. It's like I don't enjoy the experience, but I'm like, this deserves to be shown to people sometimes.
I think it's a feat in and of itself of film. Like, this is gonna be stupid. I kind of want to give it a 5 because I'm coming away going, man, what a horrible, no good, bad time. But damn, that was a good movie. That's weird.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to. Not that I would recommend you go watch this film,
No.
but Jesus Christ, I can't believe that I'm saying that right now.
Yeah, I think I'm in exactly the same boat as you are because it's like this film is not pleasant. I don't enjoy watching this film. I finish it and I go, I don't want to watch that ever again. But like Bob said, it's very well done. Like it's so well done, in fact, that I look at the film and I want to go, I dislike this so much from like an emotional aspect that I want to just absolutely dog on this film.
Yeah.
I want to hate it. Not only because of how it made me feel, but because the more I look into it, the more I learn about like just how messed up like the conditions were. You know, we say there's that moment where the scene switches in the found footage section where we realize how bad these people are. And, you know, from a behind the scenes aspect, right at that point in the film is where like a bunch of really fucked up stuff happened behind the scenes. It's where that one actor got screamed at by Deodato until she like stripped. That's the sequence where I believe it's the character who plays Alan is supposed to kill an animal.
Yep.
And he refused to do it because he like bonded with the animal. So another character does it, and then Alan's actor fumbles his lines because he's so like emotionally distraught. There's people in like a live fire, like just horrific conditions, and that coupled with how it makes me feel really just makes me want to hate on this film just from my own moral perspective of like this should not be good, but it's just very well done. There's some cool concepts.
Yeah.
And even if the message is, I think, a little hokey and not great, this film somehow interwove a message into
violence. Like
a film that is explicitly made to just show us the most horrific shit ever.
Yeah.
And you definitely didn't have to do that. I guess the point I'm trying to get at very reluctantly is I think I'm also going to give it a 5. Because
that's crazy. I didn't expect that. I thought you were going to give it a lower score than me.
No, that's why I said I wasn't going to be mad at you. Because I knew what you were going to do.
Yeah.
I knew it. But at the end of the day, it's like, I don't like this film, but I feel like it has value. I don't think anyone should try and replicate all this stuff.
Absolutely not.
But I can see why someone like Eli Roth saw this film and is like, I understand what this is, but I'm going to make a more ethical version of it. It's nowadays
horrible, awful art.
Yep.
Which is so weird.
So unfortunate. On that note, though, I guess we're going to go to outtakes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what we're going to have, honestly.
I don't know. I marked some stuff.
We marked some stuff, but it's mostly Bob going, oh.
It's a whole lot of, oh my
And
God.
me just responding with, yeah, it's messed up. So we'll see how that is.
Yeah, we'll be back in a minute. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the outtake section for this episode of Beware the Board. I hope you're enjoying our review of Cannibal Holocaust so far. This movie is horrific. It's downright awful. But without further ado, let's get into the outtakes. This first clip is Ben reading the warning that plays at the beginning of this film.
The following motion picture contains intense scenes of extreme violence and cruelty. As distributors of this film, we wish to state with absolute sincerity that by no means do we condone the artistic decisions employed by the makers of this film. However, as firm believers in constitutional rights of free speech, we do not believe in censorship. To quote Thomas Jefferson, it behooves every man who values the liberty of conscience for himself to resist invasions of it in case of others. Therefore, we present Cannibal Holocaust for the very first time in its uncut, uncensored original form with all sequences photographed by the filmmakers, however offensive or repugnant, present for full intact. What you will see will definitely shock you and offend you. Nonetheless, it should be viewed as a disturbing historical document of a bygone era of extreme irresponsibility which no longer exists and hopefully will never exist again. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Yeah, they had to be all like snooty about, oh, we're going to make money off this.
That's crazy to have to include that at the front of the film.
Yeah.
This next clip is our reaction to one of the more brutal animal deaths in this film. Oh, they're going to kill a monkey, aren't they? God damn it. Oh, fuck. Holy shit. That one got me.
Yeah.
That one got me good.
I told you.
This next clip is our reaction to the documentary crew finally starting to commit heinous acts. Holy shit.
Yep.
These guys fucking suck.
No, they're horrible fucking people. Like, absolutely the worst.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the outtakes. Do we have any announcements, Ben?
I don't believe we do.
I don't either.
So, as usual, check us out wherever you get your podcasts. Spotify, Apple Podcast, other places. We're also on YouTube, which, while not great for just audio-only content, is great for showing us some support. We can see your likes and subscriptions, and that's a really good way for us to judge, like, viewer engagement. Additionally, YouTube has a couple tools that I know it specifically has as a format that I'm not sure, like Spotify and Apple Podcast have. Very specifically, there's a search function that lets you search just our stuff to see if we've covered, like, a specific movie or something, or just any keywords. There's also the bell button, which lets you get notified whenever we post something new, which sometimes we forget, like we're doing something until the last minute, and that's a good way to keep up to date with that. So like holiday episodes and stuff. But the big thing with YouTube is it's one of the two major places to communicate with us at. You can do that in the comment section of a specific video if you have something you want to talk about with us there, or you can go over to Twitter at Beware the Board and go searching for Bob and the dense rainforest of his DMs to see if you can recover any hidden insight.
Ooh, I thought you were going to say lost footage, and I went, you do not need any footage of me. I have some tragic videos of myself on my phone.
Sure. Sure you do. I don't know.
Well, like Ben said, check us out on Twitter at Beware the Board. It's where I post updates about the show, information about the show. Basically, if there's anything you want to know about the show, it goes on our Twitter. On Mondays, I post a spoiler post for that Friday's episode, which is a hidden movie cover that you can reveal so you can watch the movie before we do. Maybe don't watch this one this week. Maybe you skip that part. Just bring that out there.
If you saw the post, I'm sure Bob put a warning in it.
There's always, maybe
that was like,
don't watch this one.
Don't watch this one.
Maybe you don't recommend this. But I also post a link to every single episode whenever it goes live. So if you ever miss an upload, whenever something, and you want to know what's going up, there's always a link on our Twitter. Last thing, we're doing short form content. I'm becoming more regular with it. I'm actually putting them up pretty regularly now, trying to keep up a good schedule.
Bob's getting actual engagement.
Yeah, and it kind of makes me feel motivated to make the content. So if you like short form content like the show, check us out at Beware the Born on TikTok and on YouTube Shorts. Ben, I think that's it.
All right. Well, I gotta go recover. So I guess we'll see you next
I
time.
think we're gonna get some Taco Bell, man.
Yeah. Great way to start the season.
Yeah, we'll see you guys next week.
See you next time.